Yep. So that's that. So there's a couple other things from the press conference today that Brian Kelly talked about. He was asked a question about Kevin Austin being more mature the second half of the year.
Yes.
And I got to give Brian Kelly a lot of credit because he paused
He
for a
did.
second before
He
he answered
really
that.
thought about what he was going to say.
Because depending on the direction it could have gone, it could have been like, okay, let's rehash. And he paused and he made it about football, which I really appreciated the answer that he gave. And he talked about how, Kevin's got to learn to do little things like nutrition and all. And I appreciated that.
Yeah.
And but he also talked about, he saw things against Cincinnati and Purdue that he'd never seen before, meaning big, tall, physical corners that were going to run a certain style. Because Notre Dame hasn't been that. This is the first year we've really seen Notre Dame do a lot of press at the cornerback position. And how, he's learned from those mistakes and how he's evolving as a player. And, the thing that's gone unnoticed about Kevin Austin in the last couple games, Vince, is that I actually have really been pleased by what we saw from Kevin in the couple games before the Navy game. Because what we saw was like he had, what was it, the USC game that he had a couple drops, right? Was it the USC game? And it's kind of like, okay, here we go again, physical corners. Because it was. He dropped that. They ran a go route early and he dropped that, and then they threw him another ball later that he dropped. And it was just, but what you saw from that game is we talked about it at the time. He didn't go in the tank. Right. He was still blocking well. He ended up making a play later in the game. And even though his numbers weren't sexy in those two games, he had 3 catches for 36 yards against North Carolina. But he played that back shoulder really well. But you started to see him do some of those little things better, Vince. And so you saw him blocking better and those kind of things. And then he obviously comes out against Navy and has a big game. Right, a money game, because it wasn't just the long touchdown, it wasn't just the 38-yard game, but then also getting open on a nice, stemming that corner, because the corner was playing inside, I believe, and he had to kind of lean him out a little bit to beat him inside on the slant. Really, he wouldn't have done that 5 games ago,
right?
And so he still has a lot to learn, but you're seeing Kevin really try to grow his game, and I thought the way that Coach Kelly explained that maturity question. And I don't think the reporter was looking for a shot on the kid that got suspended as a freshman. I didn't take it that way. But that doesn't mean Kelly couldn't have gone that way. I really appreciated how he was like, okay, let me think about this one and how I want to answer this one.
Because he used the word maturity, and he said, maturing from the game 1 to now.
Right.
And you can just go strictly on the field. And you just kind of outlined it. On the field, he has matured tremendously from game 1 to now. There's no question. And I'm sure, and we talked about the fact that, look, he's basically a first-year receiver. I mean, yes, he got some spot time as a freshman.
We disagree with that a little bit because he played,
and that's fine.
At worst, second-year receiver. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's learning on the go. And
didn't play. He was healthy for like 3 weeks last year. He wasn't, you know what I mean? That's another thing, too. He got hurt in the summer.
That doesn't count for me.
Came back for a couple weeks, worked back into the rotation, got hurt again, and was out again for the year. So it wasn't like he just didn't play. Right, he was at least still practicing and all that. I mean, he didn't play last year.
Right.
To your point.
Yes. So, and I'm sure that over the 4 years, he's matured off the field as well. Otherwise, he wouldn't still be a part of the program.
Right.
I mean, he got suspended for a reason, and it wasn't anything on the field. So, I'm sure he's matured off the field as well.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate the fact that Brian Kelly went the route that he did as well.
Because not bringing that up, because it's almost kind of like you got to let the kid outgrow that. If he truly has, and from everything and we've said this for 2 years, from everything I've heard for the last couple of years, Kevin has grown up a lot off the field.
Right.
Now it's about growing his game. And I appreciated that Coach Kelly didn't go to that part, and he focused on his maturity as a football player, on and off the field football player. That's what we talk about, nutrition and all that. And I appreciated that. So
yes, agreed.
Very much so. And I also appreciated the fact that it doesn't sound like they're moving Xavier Watts back to receiver. I did want to say that too.
No.
He had a couple really interesting comments about the offensive line. I was ready to hammer him, because he was asked about, the offensive line progressing. And he said that the offensive line didn't take a step back this Saturday, which I'm like, okay, I'm going to crush him for this one, because yes, they did. But then he went on to say they didn't play great. and how they made some mistakes. But then, of course, it's always the quarterback's fault, right? The quarterbacks did this, and the receiver, other people did this. It's never the line kind of thing. But he did say, they had some mistakes and some things. It's like, but he's still just so unwilling to just, yeah, you know what? We can't have fifth-year seniors going out there committing false starts on the first play of the game. We can't have our senior captain, with snap infractions. You know what I mean? I mean, he's got to be willing to be as critical of the line as he has been of the offense. I mean, of the defense and the quarterback all season long, and that's a little bit frustrating for me. But he did then say, they got to improve in some different things. But he also made a comment to me that floored me. They were asking about Josh Lugg, who came out of the game real late in the game. And Kelly said, yeah, he said, Jeff was really hounding me about getting him out because he was dealing with some back issues. Why does your offensive line coach need to hound you about getting a player out? Like, if that doesn't say the difference, do you think there's any chance in heck that Harry Heastand's like, hey, coach, can we please take a guy out? No.
You just do it.
And that sums up so much of what is the problem on the offensive line. You got a guy that's dealing with back spasms. We've been talking about Josh Lugg's back spasms since last year.
For years. Yeah, because
you're clearly controlling that game in the fourth quarter.
Absolutely.
How do you not get that kid out sooner? And why does your offensive line coach need to hound you about getting him out? He should just say, hey, coach,
why does he need to ask permission?
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. What does that say? That I've never heard of a scenario where position coaches have to get the head coach's permission before they take anyone other than the quarterback out of the game.
Even at the high school level, to be honest with you, like a position coach will rotate or he'll take a guy out. And maybe the head coach will be like, hey, why did you take so-and-so out? And then you give a reason. You're like, okay. Yeah, I mean, every once in a while the head coach, no, get him back in or whatever. Okay. But take him out. If you want him out, you take him out. It is your position group. You, in theory, know your guys better than anybody else. Mm-hmm. And so I think that tells me more about the relationship, right? I mean, as far as the hierarchy and the operating, like the in-game operation, I guess, when it comes to what coaches are allowed to do, right? I got a big problem with that.
Could you imagine Mike Elson being like, hey, coach, I want to,
I
don't Marcus Freeman, it's not happening on defense. And again, that's a big reason why for the last 3-4 years, the defense has been so much better than the offense.
Sure.
Because he hires people and he lets them freaking coach. And you hire good people, you don't have to worry about letting them coach. He made great hire of Mike Elko, great hire of Clark Lee, great hire of Marcus Freeman. Let him coach. You know what I mean? Let him coach. You need to do the same thing on offense, and that's what he hasn't done. And that's why him and Chip Long butted heads at times. That's why Brian Kelly didn't like Harry Heastand. That's one of the reasons he didn't like Harry Heastand, because Harry Heastand didn't let Brian Kelly have a say in what he was going to do. He just did it. I'm the offensive line coach. You know what I mean? And that says so much. Like I was told a story. It's a true story. I was told this by 3 different people, that there was a time last year where in one of the games early in the season where Coach Alexander was going to get a young guy on the field, right? He was going to put 2 freshmen on the field. And somebody had made a mistake, and Brian Kelly just lit him up on the sideline. And he looks at the kid he's about to put in, and he's like, I don't think it's a good idea to put you in now.
Because he didn't want to get yelled at.
Because he didn't want to get yelled at. Right? I mean, what does that say about you want to talk about why the offense never reaches its potential? And I hear a lot of people say, well, Tommy Rees ain't the guy, and Tommy Rees. Hey, look, with all due respect, everybody knows what my opinion was of who they should have hired when Chip Long left, right? That's not a surprise to anybody. But what do you expect a 29-year-old offensive coordinator to do when he's basically given what he's been given to work with at some very important positions?
Yep.
And so that was a madden. And maybe I'm reading too much into it. And just by itself, it's not really something that's necessarily a horrible thing. But when you just add it all up, that's what frustrates me. It's not just this. It's kind of like what we talked last night about Cincinnati's resume. It's not that they lost, that they barely beat Navy. It's not that they barely beat Tulsa. It's not that they struggled against Tulane. those things by themselves, or that they were tied 7-7 against Murray State at halftime, none of those things by themselves equal dropping Cincinnati because right. But when you add them all up, it starts to tell a different story.
And when they're all back to back,
right?
You know what I mean? It's a trend. Right. That's what it is. 3 games in a row is a trend.
Right.
So not that we're talking about that, but still.
Right. So that was a little bit of a maddening.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't like that at all.
So